By the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden pattern of chronic self-abandonment in highly sensitive people and what it takes to finally stay rooted in your own truth. In this video, you'll discover what chronic self-abandonment is and the subtle ways it shows up, why highly sensitive people often feel responsible for others long before they consider themselves, and how to understand the inner wiring behind it so you can stop disappearing and stay rooted instead. What is chronic self-abandonment? It is the repeated habit of overriding your own internal signals in order to maintain harmony or approval or safety or connection. It's not dramatic, it's very, very subtle, and it often feels responsible, even loving. But over time, it creates an internal fracture. You begin to leave yourself in small moments, dozens of times a day, and your nervous system keeps track. Here's what it looks like in everyday life. It can look like saying yes while your body says no. You feel a tightening in your stomach when someone asks you for something. You know you're tired, and you go ahead and agree anyway. And later you feel resentment, but you tell yourself that you chose it. Another way it shows up is editing your truth mid-sentence. You start to express something vulnerable, and you see a light kind of change in someone's face. And so you soften what you're saying, you make it smaller, and you add that it's not a big deal. But it was a big deal for you. Another way this self-abandonment shows up in daily life is absorbing emotional responsibility. If your partner is irritated, you may immediately scan yourself and ask yourself, did I cause this? Or what do I need to fix? And you abandon your internal state to manage theirs. Another way this shows up is prioritizing being easy. You choose the restaurant you don't want. You stay longer than you should. You don't ask for clarification. You don't negotiate your rate. Because being low maintenance feels safer than being real. Another way this shows up is downplaying your needs. You need quiet. You need time. You need reassurance. You need space to think. But instead of saying that clearly, you tell yourself, you shouldn't need so much. So you override yourself. Another way self-abandonment shows up is making decisions based on anticipated reaction. You don't ask, what do I want? You ask, how will they take it? And that question decides your behavior. Another way it shows up is leaving conversations feeling invisible. Not because others silenced you, but because you silenced yourself to maintain flow. So why are highly sensitive people especially prone to this? This pattern of self-abandonment is not a part of being a highly sensitive person. You can be highly sensitive with this stress pattern laid on top of it, or you can be highly sensitive without this stress pattern laid on top of it. It's the stress, this pattern, that causes the problems, not the high sensitivity. But why are HSPs so prone to this particular pattern? There are several reasons, both biological and developmental. First of all, as an HSP, we tend to detect relational shifts between people instantly. And we're wired to pay attention to this. The tone of voice changes, little micro expressions change, there are emotional undercurrents, or there's some unspoken tension. And you notice this discomfort before others do. So you move to regulate it, often by sacrificing your own position. HSPs also will feel relational rupture often as a threat. So for many HSPs, disconnection does not feel minor, it feels destabilizing because your system values attunement very deeply, and it values anything that maintains harmony. So conflict or disappointment can feel like danger. It can be overwhelming for the HSP nervous system. So, as a defense mechanism, we often choose to reduce ourselves or smooth it over or stay connected at any cost, even though that's not actually honest for ourselves. Another reason why HSPs tend to fall into this stress pattern of self-abandonment is that we learned early that being good meant being accommodating. Many of us were praised for being mature, being thoughtful, being easy, being helpful. So we learned that our value equals our impact on others. Our value is not our truth. And so we learned to hide that and focus on what others praised us for. Also, as highly sensitive people, we process impact deeply. We don't just notice our own needs, we feel the impact of our choices on others, and that awareness can become distorted into over-responsibility. Instead of, I can disappoint someone and still be safe, it becomes, if I disappoint them, I have done something wrong. Also, HSPs can sometimes confuse caring, with self-erasure. That's not part of being an HSP. HSP is empathetic. We care. We're emotional and we are empathetic and we care about others. We're compassionate. But because of this deep empathy and our ability to track others, we can sometimes let empathy go too far without any boundaries, and then it becomes a kind of merging. I often talk about healthy separation, where I'm loving to someone, I'm really actually full of love for that person, but there's a healthy separation between me and them, and that is what is the opposite of merging. When I merge, then it requires abandoning my own internal ground. So what makes it chronic? I mean, everyone occasionally compromises, but chronic self-abandonment is different. It's automatic, it's without thinking, it's on a body level. You often don't consciously choose it. Your nervous system chooses connection over authenticity every time. And the cost of this is that it can create quiet resentment and emotional fatigue and identity confusion and anxiety around self-expression and difficulty knowing what you even want. You start to feel, I don't know who I am anymore. So how can we understand this inner wiring behind all of this so we can stop disappearing and stay rooted instead? The shift begins with understanding what's actually happening inside of you. You are abandoning yourself because your strengths as an HSP are powerful. And without skills that anchor you internally, your default can become protecting connection instead of protecting yourself. So you can think of this as a kind of internal structure. If that internal structure is missing, then you can't anchor yourself and you end up floating and getting kicked around and depending on situations and circumstances. Internal structure means knowing your limits in real time and trusting your needs instead of negotiating them away, having clear language for your boundaries, separating your emotions from someone else's, and allowing discomfort without rushing to fix it. Basically, internal structure means that there is a sense of self in there. There's a sense of who I am and that I count as well as everyone else around me. If you don't consciously build these capacities, then your nervous system will fall back to its oldest strategy, which is maintain harmony at all costs. And that is a strategy that may have kept you safe at one time, but now it keeps you small. So what are the HSP strengths that can turn into self-abandonment when they get distorted? The first one is our deep ability to relate to other people, our emotional connection to others, our caring of other people. So our system constantly tracks relational shifts. If someone's uncomfortable or disappointed or distant, you'll feel it immediately. Without internal anchoring, your system may conclude that connection must be preserved. And so you adjust your tone, you soften your opinion, you withdraw your need. And so the strength coming from the HSP trait is caring. We care. It's a beautiful thing. The distortion is self-erasure. We care so much about others that we forget about ourselves and almost don't exist. Another part of the trait of being a highly sensitive person is being highly perceptive. We notice subtle cues that most people miss. A little flicker of tension or a slight change in tone or a pause that feels heavier than it should. That perception is very real. But without internal grounding, that perception can turn into responsibility. It can feel like something like this. They're uncomfortable, so I need to smooth this out. They seem off, so I must have done something wrong. The perception is part of the HSP trait, and it's accurate. Something is wrong, something is off. But the ownership is where it gets distorted, and that same trait can be used against us when we start thinking that it's our fault or that we did something wrong or that we're responsible. And then another aspect of being a highly sensitive person is that we're wired for harmony. We love harmony and we are very attuned to that, and we go out of our way to create that because we thrive in harmonious environments. Conflict, on the other hand, feels destabilizing and disconnection feels unsafe. So without internal structure, harmony becomes more important than honesty. So what we do is we trade truth for calm. We choose silence over friction. And it feels like maturity. We may even get complimented for it, but it slowly disconnects you from yourself. So the HSP trait brings a beautiful ability to create harmony and to see connection and to maintain connection. But when it gets distorted, it ends up being that we prioritize that over our own existence, and that's not balanced. When these strengths have no guardrails, that's when the problem is. The gifts themselves are not the problem. The issue is how we're using them. Instead of using your gifts of perception and relational awareness and empathy in a healthy way to understand yourself and build secure bonds and have empathy with boundaries, you may unconsciously use those same capacities to monitor others constantly and to preempt disappointment and to reduce yourself to avoid tension. Your strengths as an HSP turn inward and begin managing others instead of anchoring you. That is what living without internal structure means. There's nothing stabilizing you from the inside. So your strengths default to protecting connection instead of protecting yourself. So self-protection can become self-erasure. Your nervous system believes if I adjust first, I will stay safe. So it edits whatever preferences you have, it overrides whatever no may be there, and it softens your truth before it's even spoken. This is not weakness, it's a kind of protection. But over time, the protection becomes costly. You stay connected, but you lose your center. So this is where inner work and boundaries can start to come in. Boundaries are important. Clear distinctions about what you will and will not tolerate create external kind of guardrails. They give your nervous system something solid to lean on. But boundaries without self-awareness often feel forced or maybe even reactive and are not even always effective. The deeper shift comes from inner work, when you question the stressful thoughts that tell you, if they're upset, it's my fault. Or if I disappoint them, I will lose them. Or it's safer to shrink than to risk conflict. You begin to see what is yours and what is not. And self-awareness starts to change this reflex of self-erasure. Awareness alone is what truly interrupts this pattern. Boundaries then can be there as well as a support, not as a defense. They reinforce the clarity that you've already found inside. So if you're exhausted from being hyper-aware of everyone else's needs while ignoring the quiet signals inside of you, and you don't want to keep feeling responsible for everyone's moods and reactions and comfort, but what you really want is to feel steady inside yourself, even when other people are unsettled, then this is the exact kind of inner work you can explore with me in one-on-one sessions. Because chronic self-abandonment doesn't change by trying to have better boundaries. It changes when you understand the inner wiring that makes you default to others in the first place, and then learn how to stay present with yourself at the same time you're with others. In our work together, we untangle the guilt, we separate what's yours from what isn't, and we rebuild a relationship with yourself that doesn't collapse the moment someone else has a need. If you're ready to shift this pattern, go to the video description and click on the first link you find, or go to trueinnerfreedom.com/working-together. You don't have to give up your compassion. You just have to include yourself in it.